But we do have a quorum here, so if we could vote, if we had to, it'd have to be an agreement between all of us and a vote if we had to vote on something. But this is, I thought, an informational meeting. And there's a lot of faces that some of our board members don't know. So if everybody could introduce yourself, I'll just start. I'm Bill Howell, board chairman. If you don't know me, that's who I am, former teacher and whatnot.
Brian Sloan, School Board District 1.
Charles Kelly, School Board District 6.
Good afternoon. Bowen Nutting, Chief of Strategic Planning and Student Services.
Afternoon, John Ribick, Chief Elementary Academic Officer.
Adam Steele, CFO.
Maggie Becker, Assistant Finance Officer.
Michelle Cassidy, Federal Program Specialist.
Billy Berry, Deputy Superintendent.
LeVar Mazzil, Chief Human Resources Officer.
Kelly Cooper, Chief Secondary Academic Officer.
Tim Woody, CT Director.
Deborah Lester, CTE STEM Coach, grades 5 through 8.
Jackie Parker, Digital Teaching and Learning Director.
Karen Van Vliet, District Media Coordinator.
Tim Ivey, Chief Technology, Facilities and Maintenance Officer.
Kelly Henson, Director of Gifted Learning, IB, and Online Programs.
Jessica Smith, Program Director in Student Services.
Karen Curley, Lead Nurse.
Kelly McCarrier, Executive Assistant to Superintendent and Clerk to the Board of Education.
Jeff James, Superintendent.
Anita Kern, School Board District 7.
Mike Kubanek, Vice Chairman in District 5.
Oh, thank you very much. Now I'm just going to turn it over to Mr. Ribick, Mr. Steele. It's your show today, guys.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Howell, board members, Dr. James. So the reason why we do have these fine folks here is they all assist with our plan for ESSERS. They have utilized funding in their departments, and they're here to answer questions if we have any about maybe some of the things that they implemented on their end. So just to get started, we did present last February 7th board meeting, we did, or it might have been COW meeting, about ESSERS. We were at that point, and we thought we would give a update on where we are at this point. So Jade, if you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So just to give you some regulations that come with ESSERS is all of our plans and our budgets must be approved by the state. So before we've done any of this work, I've had to submit a full plan that talks about with each of these budgets that what we're going to do with the budget. And just to let you know as well, the state does have stipulations on what you can do with each of the budgets. Some a little more stringent than others. But once again, the plans must be approved and also the budgets must be approved, and that is where the finance department comes in. The state does monitor each district to ensure what we are planning is what is actually carried out. So this past January, this entire team, we had a Zoom call with our state representatives, and we went through, just as pretty much what we're going to do today, we went through each of our PRC budgets, and we talked about what we did with those budgets. We talked about impact. We talked about how we made sure that what we said we're going to do was carried out. And we had to submit evidences for each of these budgets. And the state went through all those evidences and talked to us, and we answered questions. And I'm happy to say that we have passed, if you want to call it that, we are in compliance and passed through everything. So we are in compliance with our ESSERS planning and with our ESSERS budgets. And we must continue, though, to have our future plans and any changes we make as well must be approved by the state. So anytime finance moves money from one area to another, or if we add in things as we see the need, we could, for example, we have some budgets that won't be complete until September of 2024. And based on data, when we receive our end-of-year data, we may think, ooh, we have some needs with this subgroup, or we have some needs in 4th grade math. Let's dedicate some of our funding to helping that group. So we can change plans as we go, but once again, it must be approved on all ends. We can't just do whatever we want to do and just willy-nilly say, we're going to do this and that. It must be approved, and we must show we're doing what we said we're going to do. So do you all have any questions about the process or how this works with that part so far before we get into the actual budgets themselves and plans themselves?
When you do want to change plans, does it have to be pre-approved, or do you do it and then ask for permission?
No, we have to get pre-approved, and that we'd rather do it that way, because if we change something and implement it, and then the state said, oh, you can't do that, then you know who's on the hook for that is us. So we'd rather make sure we can do something and then wait. And sometimes we have to wait a little longer than we want, but we'd rather be sure. That's a good question.
So yeah, sometimes we have to carry, say it's something that we're looking at doing, we have to carry that out of local and then move it to federal once we get approval, because everything takes approval from the state, and that does not move quickly sometimes, depending on, but every budget, I mean, we have to put a detailed explanation of what we're doing and how it relates to ESSER.
So you're going to walk us through what the different budgeted expenditures are. Could you give an overview first about what the funding was designed to target in a broad sense?
Yes, each one of these budgets really does go along with that. So as we go through the budgets, we're going to talk about what it was intended to do. Is that what you're asking?
So they're one-for-one alignment then? Pretty much?
You would know more than that.
No, it's not a one-for-one alignment that you're going to see. That's a big old document. And the approvals at the purpose code level, we're providing the detail in a summary format.
Did that answer your question, Mr. Krupanek? Okay. Any other questions before we, just about the process? Okay. So the first one that started was the PRC 163, and that was our emergency relief fund. So that is the first that the state gave us, and as you can imagine, at the time it was a little chaotic. COVID had just started, and the state said, we're going to give you, Iredell-Statesville, $3,717,330. Go ahead. But, you know, the stipulations were that it had to go to either helping with the health of your students, or either getting them caught up from academically, or what you're going to do to help move forward. So as you can see here, our categories, what we spent our money on was school allocations. So schools were given funding because they knew what they needed. So each school got a certain amount of funds, and they spent it on cleaning supplies, curriculum materials, and student materials. We also had some nursing positions. With that, we knew during that time we needed nurses more than ever to help with the students' health with that. Custodial supplies for the cleaning materials, staffing. We were able to get some more teachers and some maintenance positions. At the time, we knew we're going to have to go virtual, so we used the funding to create some online coursework, some advertising for COVID updates, child nutrition at the time. When the students were home, They needed lunches, so we had to deliver lunches to the students. Our fine arts programs needed funding, so that helped with them. And, of course, technology. Because of students being at home, we needed maintenance for the devices, we needed cases, and, of course, Zoom subscriptions. So the students being home led to a lot of what we use this funding for. Do you have any questions about this budget item?
Yeah, I do.
Sir.
When you speak of curriculum materials, now, and it was left up to the individual school, can you give me an example of what was purchased in elementary and secondary? Just not a big, long list.
No, I can speak for, what's that? Yeah, for elementary, as Adam has pulled up, we had remedial supplies, like tutoring equipment. We needed workbooks for the students to do work at home. We needed items, a lot of copy paper, as you can imagine, for making copies to send work home with the students. Online curriculum materials, Edmentum. Kelly, you can talk. Can you please talk more about that from secondary?
We had Edmentum and Edgenuity, which are programs that offer like different courses that teachers could pull pieces from different courses. If they were teaching Math 1, they could pull some videos, or science, social studies, CTE, they could pull videos and use those as part of their lesson plans as well. So it was really trying to give them that online content so that while they were scrambling, they didn't have to scramble as hard to be able to provide good, rich content for students.
The only thing I would say is, and I know I sound like a broken record when it comes to this, but Dr. Knight and myself, and I believe Ms. Curran, all agree we'd like to see more textbooks. And as I have said in the past, I visited some schools during their open house, and I go into an elementary classroom, and it's fourth grade, I believe, and the teacher has like 4 books on every desk. And I say to the teacher, I said, "You mean we started buying books again?" "Oh, no, these are old and I've taken care of them." Now, they're 15 years old. And if I go into a secondary, particularly courses like biology and chemistry, they got a set of books in there, and they may be 12, 15 years old, and they're still using them. And that's my point. Anyway,
I will say to that, Mr. Howell, we have in elementary, speak for that, we have started Bridges Math, and that does have text that goes along with it. And we started in certain schools, and it is expanding. And Dr. James has given us the go-ahead to begin looking at more literacy text that goes along with that. So we're seeing the need, and we are expanding that.
What was the spending for fine arts, and how was that connected to emergency funding?
With fine arts, we had to do quite a bit to be able to get them to where they could continue with their performance classes. Some of the things they did was we purchased tents for them to be able to play outdoors. We purchased, whether it was music, a CD box or tower for them to be able to play outside. We bought masks that the students could play and that had slits in it that they could put their instruments in, that they could play with the masks. So we had quite a bit. We had cleaning equipment. We had to buy doggy pads for them to be able to do their spit, to release the spit valves. And then we had to have the instruments cleaned. We have a lot of school-owned instruments, and you can't pass an instrument from one kid to the next without getting the instruments cleaned. So the instruments had to be sent off to be cleaned so that our kids could still have access to instruments as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's what we're trying to figure out. I know. Yes, sir. Okay. Any other questions for that? All right. So the next item was the digital curriculum, and that is also one that has expired since September 30th of 2022. And that one you had to use for digital materials, so we continued our iReady program that we have implemented in our district for a few years now. And that was one way to use those funds for that. And it had to be for a digital curriculum. That was a stipulation with that funding source. Okay. The next one is, thank you, Jada. 166 was for a Canvas subscription, and I'm going to let one of our tech people talk about Canvas, what it is and what it's used for. And this is another one that had to be used for the Canvas subscription. That's the only thing you could do with this funding source.
So Canvas is our learning management system that's used primarily in secondary. It allows teachers to put their content online so students can access it through their Canvas portal so they could do it from home easier. And like you said, this funding, this PRC was specifically for Canvas, which we were already using and already funding. I think we just switched to use this funding specifically, so saved from our local money that was probably paying for it.
I have a question. So I've heard a couple of times that we were already using some things and then shifted the money. So what other things were we able to purchase or shift money to by saving because we used ESSER funds?
So the first year, of course, I came in after 163 was already here, but if you go back and look at the budget, the district was able to shift some teaching positions. We were able to also add some teaching positions. At the first of 163, we were able to pay some maintenance positions out of that. Then the state came back and said, no, you can't do that. So we were able to save locally. The district was able to add to fund balance, which they did in 2020, 2021. Most districts across the state did that because they were able to shift money. Then the last thing once I came on, we were in the updating our technology with the technology refresh. The district was going away from Apple, is that correct? Over to what we're currently using, Dells and iPads, depending on the grade level. So the district was able, instead of using, I don't remember, I think the district probably used capital or some type of grant previously with the Apple purchase before when the district first went one-to-one. I can't speak to that. I just remember as a citizen, because I was in another district, but we were able to use the ESSER money to do this refresh. So that saved the district a ton of money from at this point by being able to just go out and purchase those at this time.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay. All right, so the next was for nursing positions, and as you can see there, that is the only item we were able to use out of that PRC 169. And Ms. Curley, I don't know if you want to speak about how this helped us out, adding these extra nurses.
Okay. So I'll just say that our district as a whole, we have about 20% of our students have a chronic health condition. So the nurses trying to take care of those 20% who have diabetes, who have severe allergies, who have asthma, seizures, those type things, and then putting a pandemic on top of that, and having to do contact tracing in the beginning. I know some of you, I know even Mr. Howell helped us out with that. It was kind of crazy in the beginning. So those positions that were added, I honestly don't know how we would have been able to manage what the state was asking us to do without the extra nursing positions.
Okay. All right, and the next, and this is the last one out of the initial budgets that have expired, and that was on our supplemental instruction, and this was geared towards catching up students from the beginning of what we experienced during the pandemic. So what we did with that funding was we staffed our summer schools. MB Mills, as you know, is one of our at-risk schools, has their restart calendar. And within that restart calendar, they have what they call intercession weeks, where the staff and students are off school, but they offer programs for the students to come in and do. So we use funds to help them support those programs. We had tutoring programs going on specifically for our at-risk schools. We used a Lexia learning program that focuses on our EC students because we knew that during the pandemic, that was a group that was hit very hard, not being able to be in school. I don't know if you can imagine some of our EC students trying to learn online. It's not ideal, so we needed some programming to help catch them up, and some literacy instructional materials. That was some of our books that we talked about, our Letterland program that we use for phonics, Haggerty program we also use for our K2 literacy, because we know that is the group we have to get them reading by, third grade. That's our goal. So those were the categories and what we used our supplemental funds for in that.
And I'll say on the summer school, and you'll see it in 171 as well, all districts in North Carolina, the state came that summer or that year when they did their budget, and they said, all right, we're not giving you summer school money. They took the summer school money away. They said, okay, you got all these federal dollars, you've got to use that for summer school. Then they came back, which was very unique, and they said, all right, you're not to pay them. You can pay them whatever. So we signed, all teachers, and I'm pretty sure we did it. I know we did it here because we did it in Hickory. They all signed a different contract. So we paid them higher than what they were originally being paid. They may have been a first-year teacher, and we may have been paying them $45, $50 an hour. And then on top of that, the state said, okay, you're going to give them bonuses too. So we had to use the district used this money to help supplement summer school because we were coming off COVID after we had went through when kids were off school, out of school. My kids were learning with me, so that was a struggle. And so then we had to use those funds to supplement because the state took those funds back from us.
Was all the 22 money spent that you were given? And what was the total amount?
I'll get back to you on that. Yep. Actually, the total of 170 was $238,791. So the total funding for all those, if you.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, sir. That's correct, isn't it? Michelle? Yeah.
This is really a money meeting, but I was wondering how much did this help to catch the kids up? Are we ahead of the counties that's surrounding us as far as catching kids up, or is our kids always going to be behind?
It did a lot to catch, especially those that weren't in school at the time. Our elementary, we did it. We were fortunate that I keep praising our board for this. Is the day the students could come back in elementary was October 4th. I still remember the day, October 4th of that year. The board said, bring them back as soon as we can. We did. Secondary they waited a little longer for some just because of what they had to work out, but even this did help catch up some. As after our first year of COVID, we had the lowest amount of learning loss in the state, and I think that a lot of what we did here had to do with that.
I think we were number 2, weren't we? We were number 1. So our students performed at number 1 in the state because we were able to bring them back quicker.
Okay. All right, so the next set of budget PRCs, we are still utilizing them now. For example, 171, which is one of our largest budgets, we still have until September 30th of 2023 to utilize the entire amount. As you can see, we started with $14,409,125, and we still have about $3,673,088 remaining with that. So just to go through what we've done with this PRC, professional development, we know we needed help in bringing the students back to school and working on the things that they would need with our teachers. Staffing is huge. Teachers, teacher assistants, a community liaison, which you actually at the last board meeting talked about finding people. I think Mr. Kubanek, you brought it up, bringing people in to go knock on doors, and when students aren't in class or not in school, are we going to their houses? Are we talking to parents and letting them know how important it is for them to be in school? So we're using funds for that. Once again, curriculum materials, and that's what I referenced before, is just continuing on to get these materials for our teachers. We have a data system program called Who Knew It, that you put students' data in and it identifies students who are at risk based on, it has all of their data points. It has attendance, it has their scores, it has their discipline data, and you can pull up a student and it red flags them for you to show you students who are at risk. So a school I can pull up, Central Elementary and look at their program, and it has all the students who are red flagged as in at risk based on multiple indicators. We continue to support the NB Mills intercession programs. We used a NC Corp tutoring, and I'm going to just fully admit that that was not a very successful program. The state said it was going to be great. We tried it out at East and Third Creek Elementary, and it was not, so we have not continued to do that this year. The bipolar air system, I'll let Mr. Ivy talk about, if you want to just mention what that is.
So in our schools that were identified that did not have newer HVAC systems which circulate the air through a building in a different way than what you may see in some of the older buildings, we were able to install bipolar ionization units, and what those do is those electronically charge the air, allow it to trap more foreign particles, and then bring that in. And so that was a noted expense that ESSERS was allowed to do. So it allowed us to update some of those older buildings, improve their air quality. So what we're seeing now is that we were going through 60-day rotations for filters, and now we're on 30-day rotations for those. So they are creating a cleaner air environment in those buildings.
Where are we, correct me if I'm wrong, our intention, I thought, when we started this was to do every school. Is that right?
I think when we looked at the schools that were built that are a little newer, the air quality in those schools, we're not seeing the need for a bipolar ionization. We could expand that if you'd like to and look at doing that, but after the initial readings, what we're seeing is the newer schools that circulate air differently don't necessarily have to have a bipolar ionization. What this does, this allows us, without having to take out the entire system, it allows you to put in the bipolar ionization and then save yourself from having to, completely rip out the HVAC whole system and redo it, which would be extremely costly.
How much of this money do we have available to do this work?
As far as ESSERS left over for
Yeah, right.
we don't have any money left over for bipolar ionization.
Okay, thank you.
So we've expended all that.
So we also continue with our nursing positions. Oh, you have a question? Sorry, sir. Sorry.
The tutoring program, was that an online tutoring or an in-person, face-to-face program? And did you do tutoring programs at more schools than just these two?
Yes, this one, the NC Core tutoring was face-to-face, and that was just at these two schools, but we have more tutoring programs, which is on the next page, which we have the Speak Life, the Aftershock, Men of Valor, and that's at multiple of our at-risk schools. And we actually have some of our folks here who perform some of those tutoring duties here. Does that answer your question, sir? Because, well, the NC Corp, because that was its own program, per se, it was more of a programming than it is that. Does that make sense? Okay. So on the next page there, we utilized a Qualtrics program, and that was helping with gathering stakeholder information and presenting information, and I'll let Dr. Nutting talk about that.
Okay, we used Qualtrics for screening our employees every day as they came to work. This was really at the height of all of the COVID stuff. Karen, when you say the term contact tracing, it kind of sends chills up my back. But this program helped us with that. We used Qualtrics every single day to make sure that our students were and our adults were not at school sick. They didn't have a fever, any of those symptoms and those kinds of things. And then we contact traced, and then Jada built a database for us that we shared out every Friday. The number of students who were out sick, the number that were at home on quarantine. Yeah, I don't even like to say the word, but yeah. So we're not using Qualtrics anymore. We were able to move out of that system, and we were very happy to do that.
And we continued with the school allocations with cleaning supplies. Now athletics is on there because of the amount of money that was lost by not having the events. Because we shut down, gosh, I remember my son was in baseball. We played a week of baseball and we were shut down. Yep. So you can imagine all the money schools lost by not having athletic events. We were able to use these funds to help supplement what was lost due to COVID. So schools were able to use money for athletics, and we continue with the curriculum materials. And as I referred to, Mr. Kubnik, you asked about the tutoring programs. We have some groups that work with us at our at-risk schools, and we're thankful for them. Communicating and advertising, we continue to provide COVID updates, but we also advertised about we were back open, and we wanted to bring students back to school, and we saw the results that I think we kept our attendance and our enrollment pretty close to pre-pandemic, where many districts lost 10, 20% of their students. And I think getting the word out helped us with that.
And we did also some advertising on mental health and the isolation that many of our students and adults were experiencing. So we did some work on that additionally with those funds.
And we continue with cleaning supplies, custodial supplies. One of the biggest items as part of this budget, PRC, was our technology. Our iPads, laptops, ClassLink, Blade Server, MacBooks. Ms. Parker, anything you want to add about the technology?
Maybe just that pre-pandemic we were not one-to-one in elementary school, so when the time came that we went to remote learning, we did not have enough devices for every student. So these funds helped us to purchase enough iPads so we would now be one-to-one. So whether they use them in the classroom or elementary doesn't take them home now, but they have them enough so they don't have to share in the classroom. Yeah, there was a whole list of things that we bought. We were able to replace the office staff computers, updated them because our office staff didn't have laptops to take home. They were still working on desktops. So when everybody went to remote learning, scrambling again to find devices for them to use. ClassLink is our single sign-on portal, so all the programs that students and staff use to sign in with a username and password, they're all inputted into this program, and you sign in one time into ClassLink, and it will allow you to sign in to everything else without having to remember all those passwords. Our Blade server is the main server at Ray Street, and for years, we've just limped along and used old computers as servers and things like that, and this was a time where we could use some funding to purchase new equipment that would get us up to date, because I know the stuff we had was over 10 years out of date, so we were able to do that. We did purchase the laptops that CCTL uses. We were able to get some things he didn't spell out on there. We were able to get some equipment because we moved to iPads for our middle schools. Our CTE programs needed mice to run some of the programs they use, so we were able to get mice that work with the iPads. We were able to get some equipment for the teachers that were teaching synchronous learning for our Extend teachers, where we don't have teachers in those classrooms, so usually a TA is covering it, and the teachers projecting themselves into maybe the room across the hall of another class of students. We were able to buy some of that equipment. We also got some Logitech crayons for our high school and middle school visual arts teachers. We realized that they had a visual arts component that was digital that they were not able to teach because they couldn't on their MacBook or their laptops that they had. So now that, we provided iPads for the high schools, and middle schools already had them, so we bought them some crayons so they could do their digital artwork, still drawing with that. I think that's about it. We were able to purchase a digital citizenship software that the whole county's using. I think one school is using something else because they were already doing it, but everybody else is using it.
And we continue to use funds for our summer learning, as Mr. Steele brought up. The state basically said that summer, you have all this federal money, use that. So part of that came out of this budget. We purchased activity buses. The district needed those to help with their athletics. The staff bonuses that the board last year voted to provide a bonus to all staff. And that is, correct, Adam, this is where the funds came out of. Go ahead, sorry.
Came out, part of it came out of 171, majority of it came out of 181 because that was the bigger bucket of money.
But once again, that is, the bonus was, the board voted to provide that to all staff at that time. And then media center allocations, we knew our media centers they lost fund because of all the COVID loss. They needed more materials. So Ms. Van Vliet, you want to talk about what the media centers did with that?
Thank you. Because we were right in the middle of spring break when the decision was made to shut down the schools with regard to COVID, we had a lot of our library books out. Students had them out, they were checked out. And when we finally did come back to school, we experienced a loss of over $38,000 in books for our media centers. And as a district, our media centers are fund site-based, which means the individual principal determines how much of their budget they're going to provide to the media centers. And with that amount of loss, there was just no way that a principal could replace what needed to be replaced in the media center. So this committee allocated $7,500 to every elementary school to replace books and $5,000 to every secondary school to replace books. So that not only covered what was lost, but it did help to increase the average age of the collection that currently exists here in the media centers in Iredell County.
Anything else with that budget?
I just, how are we going to do this when this money runs out?
Mr. Steele's going to find it for it. No, we don't know.
I mean,
that's one thing we are planning on now. We have already started these discussions. We are continuing to have these discussions, and we can count on anytime we talk ESSER funding, Mr. Steele saying, don't forget, and as we tell anybody who comes to us, you don't know how many, when these funds first came out, Kelly, how many companies Dr. James contacted us about purchasing and buying and this and that and everything. I mean, it was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And we just keep having to say, we got to look for things we can either fix at the time or things that we can hopefully continue down the road. That is discussions we continue to have with that. So I agree. Go ahead.
Do you have any idea what that dollar amount is? Certainly for one-off things, that's a one-off purchase. But things that have a tail, like employees you hired or program licenses that have to be continued.
Yep.
So do you have any idea of what that is? What that tail is?
So that's what we're in the process of going through right now, is looking, okay, how many, for instance, I mean, it was up there, nursing positions, how many were added because they have to have an end date on them. The state says you have to put an end date. Anything hired out of ESSER, we've hired some additional TAs. Okay, so is there a way we can fund those? Is there a way and keep those? Can we shift money around? I know Jackie Parker and I, we've talked about some of the technology contracts. Okay, is there stuff we can do without? What are things we're going to have going forward that we may have to build in to the local budget? That's why we went ahead and requested a large increase this year from the county, whether we get it or not. But we have to start having those conversations with the county and start looking for ways. Hopefully, the state is looking at ways because they know some of this stuff like nursing, mental health is issues that are not going away. And I know in the governor's budget, he mentioned some of that. Don't know what the House or Senate's going to do, but those are things we're going to have to continuously talk about as we go through and as we work through the budget.
We're going to, teachers are going to get, it looks like maybe as much as, well, employees, 5% increased. Can we handle that? Because that's a bunch of money.
I mean, we have to cover it. We can handle the 5%. I mean, we built into the local budget a 3% increase, and that was about $850. So if you add another 2%, you're looking at somewhere around $1 million. We can handle that for our locally funded employees. The state employees, the state does pick up that money as well.
Yes, sir.
Al, all this stuff that was added for COVID, when COVID goes away, we added it for COVID. When COVID goes away, we don't need it anymore, correct?
Yeah, some of the items, especially the cleaning, the extensive cleaning materials, things like that, more of those, yes.
The positions, I mean, it's very difficult to let loose of anybody, and I hate that. Yep. But when COVID goes away, we don't need the positions anymore, correct?
Depends on which positions. Teaching, TA-wise, I think we'll still need that because we still have gaps, as you know. Especially our most at-risk schools, COVID absolutely decimated some of our schools. And they're going to need catching up for the next while. So I think those positions. As for maybe maintenance, things like that, I know Mr. Ivey might be able to talk more about that. I don't know if we'll need as much having to do with the cleaning and the extensive work like that.
I think what I'm wondering is, was they positions that we already needed and we got them through the excuse of COVID?
Some, yes, because you can always, I mean, a nurse in every building, principals and everyone have been saying that since the beginning. I mean, when I first became a teacher 24 years ago, I was blown away that we didn't have a nurse in every building all day. I mean, when I grew up and went to school, we did. So those are our things that
So nurses, we have 4,000 students on health plans. We don't put you on a health plan because you sneeze. We put you on a health plan because you have a serious illness. We catheterize kids daily. We clean feeding tubes daily. There's a whole lot of things we do. We keep saying that, but nobody wants to come in and look. We're a hospital, a school system. We're all of it. And we're given a ratio of nurses that cannot do the work. There is no doctor's office in this world that could do the amount of work our nurses are asked to do every day. So we were already short. COVID helped us get up to about 25 or 26. We lose those 8 or 10 nurses we hired. We're back down to giving subsistent care to our kids. We're seeing more kids with diabetes that require constant monitoring. So you're asking the teacher to do it. So all this falls on some adult in the classroom. So teachers trying to worry about their lesson plan and also worry that Bowen with severe diabetes doesn't fall out on the floor because of insulin. So our state is one of the last in the nation when it comes to ratio of nurses, social workers, school psychologists, etc. We saved a whole lot of money as a state when we shut down. We called them asylums. I wouldn't call them mental health hospitals, but we decided to shut all them down and put all those people out in the street. So 70% of our state prison system is now those people that aren't getting mental health services because we were such a great state. We closed them down because we didn't need them and then turn around and put them in a jail where they don't get help. So I'm not going to pat myself on the back. I'm embarrassed about it, but that's our state. But then we shuffle them into our schools and expect us to close that gap. We can't be everything to everybody. So I'm just going to tell you 2 years from now when all this money's gone, if we think schools are bad now, we haven't seen nothing yet.
I want to say that, yes, North Carolina was behind in social workers. We were behind in nurses. We were behind in guidance counselors. people like that as our teenage death rate went up, and we put our heads in the sand and didn't do anything about it. And during COVID, I think we lost 3 students to suicide in this county. Now, I blame closing schools for that. You isolate somebody, and exactly that happens. If we're depressed, we're going to get more depressed. I don't know. It seems like over the last 15 years or so, we've got a label for everything. And a lot of those labels, the state comes in and says, hey, you got to do this for this child. Now, how are you going to do it? Because they're not providing the funds to do it. But yet they'll create a law that says we have to do it. And this is overworking our staffs and continues to do so in that regard. I'm sorry, but public education has become something unlike what most of us went to school doing, because we now have so many services that we must provide. Not that we can provide, we must provide them by law. So therein lies our issue as a Board of Education and the superintendent to find the money to do it. Thank you.
Feel the need to say here, we've got about 4 or 5 more pages here, and we've got about 45 minutes to cover them. In general, these are like grants. And everybody who has been associated with the educational system for the past 30 years is very familiar with what you have to do with grants. You're going to spend them the best way you can for what it is that you have to spend them for. When that grant is done, you have the question of what you're going to do with those positions or what you have established with that grant. The word we didn't use was sustainability. What of these grants do you have to sustain? At the top of the list, as far as a lot of people are concerned, are nurses. Because we wanted a nurse in every single school when we started. Well, we've gotten closer, but we're going to have to go backwards. Where and when and what and how? That's the question for everything on this entire list. Is it not the question? I can ask at this point. I can go back to the front of this. Everything that came with strings. This is the way you must spend it. Now, all of that started because some idiot somewhere in the world started a virus. So we had to deal with that, and we were lucky enough to get funds that got us through some of this. Some of that we're going to be able to sustain. Others of it we will not be able to sustain. I and 6 of my colleagues are going to have to sit down and figure out which ones of those we can work with along with the people that have the numbers. That is going to be an excruciating event, one right after another. But we can't solve those today. Let's just go through the way the money has been spent and used to this point, knowing that they came with guidelines, and as far as I'm concerned, nobody has gone outside of that guideline. It's all been spent correctly. He said when he started, all of it was done correctly. We just went through it in January. It was done correctly. We're on beam, correct?
Yes, the state.
Everything has been done
to be
correctly.
Things we were supposed to.
And when that money runs out, we've got to figure out how we're going to do the next step. But that's not something we can solve today. So let's stay on what it is that we're doing here and what's next.
Right. So the next is the supplemental contract support. And these funds are for helping with school-based mental health. Go ahead, Ms. Jessica.
These funds help provide comparable services to the southern end. So as you're aware, our school-based mental health contract with Children's Hope Alliance is covered currently by 3 federal grants that we have that covered our 21 grant schools, leaving our southern end not covered. So we used ESSER funds to cover the southern end and provide comparable services to those students.
The next one, 174, was a school nutrition grant budget. It is like a grant, you're right, Mr. Kelly. And that was just bonuses provided to school nutrition workers. And that was because of all the work that they put in, all that they did. The state provided funds for us to give each school nutrition worker a bonus. How much was that, Adam?
So while I'm looking it up, I'll have to back into it. I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay.
But they had to present a plan to the state that we had to submit. And Michelle, if you can look that up, see what the bonus was per person, but they had to submit a plan. They had to go by, if they're full-time, they get X. If they're 20 hours, they get X, but we'll find that for you.
Okay. The next was our summer bridge, and that is services provided over the summer. And what we're continuing to do with that is we knew that we need a credit recovery program to help a lot of our students. A lot of students missed out on some credits because they were either behind or because of COVID. So Ms. Cooper and her department they provide credit recovery. And one of the best programs we have around, and Dr. Lester can speak on this, is and I wish Dr. Knight was here because he's so involved with it, is our Rockets, Rovers, and Robots program that's held here over the summer.
I am on Teams.
You are, sir. So I just want to share, that's a wonderful program, is it not?
Yes, it is. And I'm trying to turn on video. So there we go. Hey, yes, Rockets, Rovers, Robots, excellent program. And one of the girls that was on the radio with us the first year we did it is now at Mitchell, and she's doing. So it's an excellent program. It reaches kids we can't reach otherwise, and that's all. I think that's the. Would you agree?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. The intention with that program was we had schools reach out to those students who were disengaged in school. Fifth graders going up to sixth grade, and what's the other grade, Kelly?
Rising ninth graders. We did eighth graders and ninth graders, and it was really just to get them excited back with school. So they did ELA, math, ELA, math, and science were all kind of integrated into the Rockets and Rovers camp. And again, Dr. Knight was pivotal with that piece with getting kids excited about school again.
And we're going to be doing that again this summer. Dr. Lester, can you give us the dates so maybe they can write down? Say that again to the mic, people can hear.
July 10th through July 27th, right here at CATS. You've probably seen our Mars pit, our Mars simulator, which is what you see out there in the warehouse area.
What's the attendance? What are you expecting? Do you know?
30 to 50 students, rising 6th and rising 9th grade students.
Thank you.
And board, I do not get paid a cent to do the work on that.
Did you hear that? They said good.
Good. Okay, good.
All right. The next is our Career Accelerator, and that's Mr. Woody's program. I'll let him speak about that. If you don't mind, use the mic, please.
I'm sorry. I always forget that. We started, and the state, this is the first time they ever funded CTE to do summer camps, and the real tie for this one is it had to be career-oriented with whatever camp you offered. So we set aside and put planning last year, put a team together, and came up with 10 different camps that we were going to offer last year. And through those 10 camps, you can see we spent all but $82,000 of that funding across the board for looking at camps. So one of the things, to your sustainability point, Mr. Kelly, was that approaching CTE, we looked at the equipment and the opportunity we had, not only in summer school to provide that opportunity for camp, but also that enrichment piece throughout the school year, that through our middle school CDC, Julie Tipton and Dr. Lester, that we could push them into classrooms across middle school to help get those kids geared back into thinking about careers and thinking about CTE and that coursework. So as we begin to purchase and plan for that summer as well as this coming summer, we're looking at things that can be a value add, not only for summer, but for the following school year, and equipment that we can maintain and licenses that we can, move forward through CTE. Now, obviously, we won't be able to fund as many camps as we funded after COVID funding is over, but we are going to try to stick to a core of 4 to 5 that we think we can sustain every summer, the ones that matter and we've had the most impact with and the most attendance with. Those are the ones we're going to continue on with.
Thank you, sir. The next was our competency-based assessments, and those funds must be used for an online assessment program. So once again, iReady is the system that we've used in our district. It's the one the teachers want. So that is what we use this funding for. Okay. So that ends the budgets that are due or need to be spent by September of 2023. The next set are ones that we have until September 30th of 2024. 181, like 171, pretty much the same basic guidance, and it is our largest one here. As you can see, our total funds for that is $32,273,815. We still have $8,884,721, and once again, we have until September 30th of 2024 for those funds. So with those, continuing on with our curriculum programming, knowing that we're going to continue to need programs and looking for more items, as you said, Mr. Howell is looking at, that's where our math program's coming in with our texts with that and our literacy materials, things with that. We know that our restart schools, as we talked about this previous Monday evening, we need more for their staff for what they do. So we use some of these funds to provide bonus based on data. So school teachers in those schools, if they reach growth marks, they earn a bonus for doing so. Professional development, as we brought the students back, we know rigor, relevance, and relationships are needed in our schools. So providing professional development for that. Once again, our Rockets, Rovers, and Robots camp, the first one before we had the other funding, we used this funding for, the one we had 2 years ago. We use this funding because this will be our third summer, won't it, with that? Okay. Our MB Mills intercession, will continue to fund that. We have a federal program specialist. So before ESSERS, we had 4 federal budgets, total 4. And now with ESSERS, how many federal budgets do we have now? 28. So we went from 4 to 28 budgets we are responsible for. So with this funding, most other districts had already done this. They've put in a specialist to help with the budgeting and entering, because this is a lot of work to get these plans and budgets. So we were able to hire Ms. Cassidy here, who is our over federal programs, to help with that, to make sure we are following everything we need to do and making sure our budgets are in on time and incorrectly. Our online course creation. Ms. Henson, you want to talk about what we've done to create our online courses?
So several years ago, we started the initiative to try to move away from using outside vendors and also using North Carolina Virtual as much as we were, because we saw a way that we could have some savings there and keep that in-house. So one thing that we do is we use our secondary teachers, middle and high school, to create online content and courses that we house within Canvas. And then this way we can offer our students when the need arises and they need flexibility. For example, if the course is not offered within that high school, or if we have a teacher position that can't be filled and we need to be able to provide that course, we're able to tap into our online courses and be able to meet that educational need for those students.
And as you said, using our own people
Correct.
is one thing we'd like to do.
Keeping it in-house, yes.
Continuing on with staffing, the need for teachers, teacher assistants, continuing our data program, as I alluded to with the 171. The summer learning, we use some of the funds from here for that. The nursing positions, nursing supplies, technology. Ms. Parker, anything you want to add from this budget with technology?
It was just more of the same. We were in a device refresh year, so in addition to with the 171, we used those funds to purchase iPads to bring our elementary schools one-to-one. Now it was time to refresh all of high school, middle school, and the remaining elementary school devices. So we did use ESSERS money instead of pulling it out of local to pay for those. I think before we had done a lease where we made payments throughout the course of the 4 years. And this time we just bought them outright, which we did go with some laptops, Dell laptops, some iPads, and some MacBooks. So we had a little bit of different devices. So I'm not sure they all would offer lease options anyway. And we did also, we were able to get teacher assistant iPads because during remote learning, we realized they didn't have a device either to host some of the Zoom groups that they did with the students or to do the online training that they are required to do also. So we were able to get devices to send home with our teacher assistants.
And we have the activity buses we spoke about, for more funds for that. The staff bonus, as we talked about, for all of our staff. And what we're excited to start next year, Dr. James had us visit Union County. They have a very successful tutoring model they're utilizing for their low-performing schools. We're going to be implementing this next year. And we believe if we do it the way that they're doing it, we're going to see some pretty significant gains. They do it for their 4th grade and 7th grade math. They do it for every single student in their low-performing schools. And we're looking at implementing the same model here in our schools, because if you see something that works, we should instead of reinventing the wheel, we can make it work here as well. So we're going to use these funds for that. And then there's a literacy, we partner with Indwelling Church for a literacy program for Third Creek Elementary and Celeste Hinkle Elementary. That's what we're doing with our 181 funds. Okay. 188 is our summer enrichment programs. That's Mr. Woody as well.
Thank you. And on these funds, you can see we haven't started spending that yet. Those go out on September 24. We have a plan in place where we offered 10 summer camps last summer. We bumped that to 18 camps this summer, and looking at opportunities and different things as a way to advance and work with Marlene Scott to work, who is our community liaison. We're going to push some of our summer camps in the community this summer as some that we're adding to give those kids who maybe not have the opportunity to have transportation during the day. We're going to push summer camps into them, and again, we're going to leverage the equipment we purchase and camps we offer so that we can leverage that value add not only for summer, but also for the school year. And we've got that set aside for the summer of 23 and the summer of 24, and then looking at utilizing the equipment through the school year 24-25. And then we've got a plan then to reorganize and see if the 4 to 5 camps we can sustain after that for the summer. Thank you.
All right. The next is our 189 instructional year program. These funds must be spent on math tutoring for grades 4 through 8. So you can see we haven't spent a lot. We've just started this. We're right now our schools are offering after school tutoring for those students. And another thing you can do is offer math experiences. A lot of the students in our at-risk schools have not had a chance to have any experiences outside of school. So you can use these funds to provide some experiences for students. Maybe they can learn about some math jobs that are out there, or what they can do as they move on to their next careers. So those funds are designed for that, and that's what we'll be doing with those.
Is this math tutoring for grades 4 through 8, or is that just what we're choosing to use for?
Nope, you must use them for grades 4 through 8. Yes, sir. The next is PRC 191, locating missing students. This was designed, as you know, when we came back from COVID. Some students did not return. So we were able to hire, as we talked about, as Dr. James alluded to, we needed social workers. We were able to contract with some social workers, and their main role is to locate missing students and to work with families, but they can also do some of the responsibilities that social workers do. I'll let Jessica, is there anything you want to add about this one?
A little bit for the department. It's been challenging to secure people that want these contract social work positions. What we find is that we get them hired, they attend our social work meetings with the rest of the team, and they're like, oh, I want one of those positions, full-time, permanent. So it's been difficult to keep people in the contracted position right now, and hiring and holding an interview and saying the funding for your position ends in September of 2024, which we're dealing with some of our other positions. But the objectives of this budget are being covered by the social work team as a whole.
The next is 192, and that's cyberbullying and suicide prevention. And with this PRC, this budget, you had to use it on online materials that identify issues you might have with cyberbullying or with suicide, so Lightspeed and Gaggle. So I'll let Jackie talk about what these programs do.
Yes, so Lightspeed is our internet filter. We are required by law to filter the devices and the internet that the students have access to. Lightspeed has an alert system with it, and much like Gaggle, Gaggle's a separate software that monitors the students' Gmail account and Google Drive for their documents and things like that. And a little bit about how it works. What Gaggle does is it will, it looks for pictures or keywords, and it'll tag it. And if it's a possible student situation, which is emergency, it will call a team of people at the school that we designate, and they'll start down the phone tree. And if people don't answer from the schools, which they do, they'll call one of us. And we've had phone calls in the middle of the night that this student has just sent an email about potentially thinking about suicide, or they're being abused at home or whatever. So this system really helps with that. It allows us to identify those students right away and do that, or handle those situations. And then the Lightspeed, like I said, is our filter. And we have, with this filter, we're able to customize what we block and unblock. So for instance, we may unblock something for high school that they need in their health curriculum, but is inappropriate for elementary school for some of the topics. Some games, I know some games are needed in elementary school, like in the computer lab to learn mouse skills, or just some of their math functions and things like that, whereas other games we need to block, so we don't just have to block games in general, something like that. So this PRC was supposed to be specifically for programs like that, and so it wasn't. The next one he's going to talk about, 193, was for Gaggle specifically, and that grant did not cover the cost of Gaggle with our number of students, so we used part of this PRC to pay for the Lightspeed and to cover the remaining costs of Gaggle.
I'm assuming you get flags hourly. How often do you get a serious call?
I get all the flags, so for every school, so I had to set up a folder in my inbox, so I don't see all of them, but the emergent ones come to me. They get an email notice as well as a phone call. So if it's just that if it's an emergency, they call, but if it's just something that the school can deal with on their own, it's just an email that goes out to that team of people, but it's daily. Of course, we see less in the elementary school than we do the middle and high school, but it's daily. And when I first took this position, which was right after we went home for remote learning, the director before me said, "Oh, you won't get that many Gaggle calls. I've gotten maybe 2. That week, I got 4. And that was when kids were still on remote learning. So we've encouraged principals, hey, it always comes from this phone number. Please answer, because if they didn't answer, I'm going to have to call them to find out some more information. So schools are answering those calls now. So I hope they've dropped off some of the emergency ones. I think that they have, but it's been a very impactful tool for us.
Is it getting better or worse?
I think it's getting better. Now, it does filter some things, like if a student uses the lingo KMS, that's their shortcut for kill myself. It'll flag that, but really when the school goes and talks to the student, they said, oh, I was just emailing my friend, I was just kidding, I'm really not going to do that. We get a lot of those, but we don't want to make the judgment call of, oh, they were just kidding. We still want to address them to make sure.
Okay. Questions? All right, as Ms. Parker said, the next one was just for gaggle, and we didn't have enough to cover it for the entire district, so we did use the other one for that as well. The next 195 is our school improvement leadership, and that was strictly for NB Mills Elementary. Mr. Nicastro was here, the principal, so I'll let him talk about what they've done with that.
Okay. So for that, we used some of the money to purchase the Second Steps program for all of our K-5 teachers to be able to implement that each morning to try to help with coming back to school and some of those challenges. We also purchased some decodables in line with the letters training to help teachers with teaching phonics and phonemes. And then we started in after-school activities and tutoring. So we've kind of married it where they'll do a club and then get tutoring in math. And we focused on math because that is where we're struggling the most.
So as I said, those funds were specifically aligned to NB Mills to help with their coming back from COVID, because the state recognized that school with that. The next was 203, and that was a teacher bonus for our district, and all of that went to our certified teachers, and this came from the state. We heard a lot of, well, I know our classified staff felt left out on this, and they have every right to. And they brought it up, why didn't we get money? And they thought it was us as a district made this decision. We did not. This came from the state of North Carolina that said only certified teachers are able to receive this bonus. And do you know how much each got with that one, Mr. Steele?
It was a $1,000 COVID bonus as well. And like John said, this was the one that was the most contentious, where people said we as a district didn't have their coding right, you name it, we heard it. But this was directly from the state, who got it and who didn't. And so we followed the law and used every bit of funds we had available to provide this.
And as we said, our classified staff deserves every bit as much, and we wish that the state would have recognized that as well, but they did not. And then our final one with this was 205, which we've already utilized. As you can imagine, what COVID did to driver's ed, that they could not do it for a long period of time, and that adds up. My son included was in that group. He turned 16 at that time, and his driving was delayed months. So the state gave us extra funds to pay to provide more hours to get in as many students as we could to catch up with that. And I believe that we're caught up now since then, but it was tough at the time because you had a lot of students who turned 16 who were waiting to get their driving in, so we got extra money for that. So that pretty much covers all of the budgets that we receive funds for. And as we said, you could see there what was designed for. We want to keep you updated on that. We will. I've been, I think, in 4 years again, even when COVID's over, we will still be monitored on it between what we do now and the end of 2024. So I have to continue to keep up with everything we're doing. I have to continue to keep up with evidences and to make sure what we say we're doing, we're going to do. And our finance has to do the same thing with the budget part. So it's not just, we've been monitored, we're good, we can do whatever we want until September 2024. That is not the case. We wouldn't do that anyways, but still, that's not the case. We still have to follow our guidelines up until that time because, like I said, in 4 years, again, we will be monitored even when it's over. They're going to come in and say, show us what you did from this point on until here, and we have to show that what we said we're going to do, we did it.
Let me establish what I think is in place, okay? When we learned that we had funds in these particular areas, all the areas that you've outlined here, and those funds came in, they were in lump sums, whatever.
Yes.
Did you individually sit down and decide how you're going to spend all that money?
I did not, nor would I want to.
Yeah, that's right. I'm
This
trying to establish.
This-
Okay, so how many people did you have with you to establish each one of these? All these people?
If it was in their department,
If it was
yes.
in their department, you brought them
Yes,
in
sir.
and sat down in groups and decided
With
how you
fin-
were going
with
to.
us, when we get a budget, we would say, we would get together as a district team and say, this is the budget, this is what it's intended for, what departments.
These are the
could use this budget.
these are the guidelines.
Bring them in and say, what are our needs? Let's look at our data. What are our needs? We did at that time talk about too, just remember that this will not be past this date. We had the dates.
Right.
We can't go past this date, so just keep that in mind, department, whether it's curriculum department, HR, teachers, want to add teachers, that's great. But after September of 2024, we might not be able to afford all these we have to make plans as we're moving forward with that. But yes,
So when you sat down with those groups, how many people were in each one of those groups, would you say?
it depends on if you 163, 71, 181, pretty much everyone here.
Okay.
And if not more, because some people couldn't make
So
it.
you had at
Now
least
some-
3, 4, 5, 10 people
Oh, easily.
in each of these groups.
Now,
And-
some, for example, school nutrition, Tina Wilson's the only one we need in there. Like their bonus.
I
Tina,
understand
you
that.
getting a bonus. Or driver's ed.
She's the only one you
No,
would
we only
need.
need the driver's ed people.
Okay,
Our
so
big ones, 163.
you would have those
171,
people available.
181, this group.
Okay, the next point is, so you were there.
Yes.
And you have 20 years' experience. And so if you had 5 other people there, would I be safe to say that each of those people probably had at least 5, 6, 10 years of experience in education? So you had
people here, yes.
very qualified people sitting down with you, determining how this money was going to be spent under guidelines from the state, telling you how it could be spent, and then you have guidelines all along, and then you're going to finish up with guidelines to show how this was spent correctly. Is that
Right.
not
Well,
correct?
because when we make our plan, I have to submit it in a system, and the state reviews that plan. They either kick it back to me and say, you cannot do X, Y, Z, or please tell us more about this. We have a question about this.
So what I'm saying is, this is not arbitrary. This is not capricious. This is not racial. This is not any one person's idea. We have good minds to sit down as a group to determine the money being spent. So I, as a board member, am trusting you to do it correctly. And I go back to that very first sheet. That's actually all I need. Their guidelines came from the state. You have guidelines on each one of them. You're going to be held accountable when it's all over. You better be right. And so far, we are. Now, one other crazy question. Did you ever turn in anything outside of the guidelines that was okayed or told
Not
you-
outside. They'll say, can you just tell us more about this?
Did we do so-and-so?
Yes.
And you got answers before, you've already established.
I have
you
to
got
or we
answers
can't do
before.
it.
So
They'll send back that they won't let us use they'll take it out of our budget. They'll say you cannot do
can't
X,
do
Y,
it.
Z. We've not had that.
So they're
where they flat out said we
I'm just establishing. I just feel like there are guidelines there for all this. And we have extremely qualified people to sit down and determine how these funds are being spent. And the money that's left over, we have those same people determining how that money is going to be spent. Now, sustainability, that's something else. That's not for today. That's later. But right now, we have a good handle on the funders that are going on. Is that correct? So I don't worry about how the funds are spent because I trust the group that's going to sit down and figure it out. That's all I personally need. And I think some other board members are the same way. Just wanted to feel like that we're doing the right thing in the right order and it will come out at the end. Correct. correct?
And like you said, there's accountability throughout
Throughout the whole
process.
thing. You couldn't even do it if you wanted to. You couldn't go outside, you couldn't go outside and do it incorrectly even if you wanted to. Or you would be caught sooner or
Or
later.
as I say, if we did, yeah, the budget would come back and they'd say, you can't use ESSERS, figure it out yourselves. You'll use whatever money you want to use, but you cannot use this.
Well, I certainly appreciate, when this whole thing started, it's like a lot of people described, we were building an airplane after the airplane was off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
We said that many times. So what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? How are we going to handle it? And we came through pretty well because of these funds and people that were directing the information in the best possible way. We did very well. Just like we said, when we got through our lack of learning, what were we, number one in the state in reference to how much we didn't lose, or however you want to say it. So all of this was used along those lines. We're now hopefully coming down to the end of it, and I hope we come down to the end of it. But I feel like we're doing well in reference to, because we had guidelines, we had to do things that we had never done before. Luckily, we had some money to do them with. That's like, for example, would love to be able to keep all of the nurses, all of the social workers. I wish we could get them and tell them, and I see your point, we could get them and tell them, we're going to hire you now with this money and then we're going to keep you forever. Well, good luck. So those things are those things that are going to come up, and those things we have to deal with. But right now, the money being spent is being spent very well. Correct?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you.
And we went from, like you said, we went from being reactionary, where we're now planning ahead. Before we just had to react, and it was difficult. But now, and Dr. Nunnings alluded to it, she's like, I'm so thankful that when we get together, we're talking about what are we going to do in the future? What are we going to do next, rather than let's look back. So that's what I'm excited about with these funds, is we can look ahead now with.
And the one other good thing I think is happening is that when you sit down with this group, I don't think there's a single solitary person in that group that's antagonistic, that throws monkey wrenches. They're all very good to work with. Is that not correct? We have a good staff. Thank you.
Any other board member have a question, comment?
I just want to say thank you for taking the time to come and let us know about these things, and I appreciate all your efforts.
Mr. Kelly, did we not pass a grant for nurses before COVID? No, did we not get a grant and pass it?
Yeah, we had a grant and we passed for nurses,
Right.
but it was only for so many,
Right.
for only so period of time.
And
So again,
it was 7 years, was it
the
not?
sustainability is
Yeah.
still going to come up.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. We had a grant before COVID.
But it still didn't cover one for one.
No.
No.
Okay.
We haven't done that.
I think a few, I don't know, Curly, you may be able to know more about it, I'm not sure. We did get a few more, like you said, but not like we were able to do.
Oh yeah. What we would have wanted to start with, we still don't have. Right. Do we?
No, we
I
don't.
didn't think so.
Yeah, so we have nurses on, the summer of 2020, we added 6. And then that spring right before any of us knew our world was getting ready to change, we have 2 that are on a grant. So we have 8 potential nurses that have been added since then.
And my last question is, and I've asked this before, and do we get any help from county agencies, like the health department or DSS?
I can say, as far as the health department, they work really well with us if we have a need, that type of thing. But as far as nurses coming into the schools, we don't have health department nurses that come into the schools that work with our students that have chronic health conditions. And the same with DSS, their social workers deal with different things than what our social workers would.
All right, those are big agencies, and we're not getting as much help as maybe they could provide. But they sure will throw rules on us, won't they? Any other board member? Thank you for coming. Mr. Kelly?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
I have a second.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we're adjourned.